Hey, everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for...
And the winner is... UnSpun.
What a marathon to get to the big announcement, George. The announcement. Did you watch it live or did you just be like,
I
yeah?
did.
Okay.
No, I watched it.
Okay.
Well,
So,
I thought it wasn't, hey, we called it. So
let's tell people, if you're just catching up on the saga that is policing in Surrey, the decision came down from the province. Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth stepped up to the microphone and laid it down. Here's what's going to happen, people. He like the clip. I remember I was walking and listening to the live stream on my phone. I was out in the woods, and I was listening to it. And I'm like, well, there's the clip. There's the clip that leads every news, because it's like, today I am, boom, right? So we did call it, but boy, was this a long journey to get here.
Yeah, and our show is called UnSpun, and one of the things that we talked about last week was the province was laying all the groundwork from a public relations point of view. That's how we were able to kind of anticipate this, because they were doing everything from a spin point of view to lay the groundwork for making this
Planting
announcement.
Easter eggs.
Easter eggs. Yeah.
Easter eggs. It was like watching a Marvel movie. It's like, oh.
Yeah, it was interesting. And I would say, we haven't seen any polling, but I would say they probably doing a good job at it. So we have to get in the minds now of Brenda Locke, though, because she's still pushing back. The mayor of Surrey is still pushing back.
Right. So let's just lay it out a little bit more detailed for those who haven't been as geeked out on this as you and I have. So for the last number of years, it has been Surrey Police Services transition hit pause, with Surrey RCMP, the law enforcement of record, right? The authority of record. And then now the move to the SPS is no longer on pause. And there's actually a special advisor coordinator who is more than capable. And now her name just flew right out of my mind. Darn it.
Oh, it's the former Hydro CEO, right?
Yeah, former CEO of Hydro.
Who was fired by the government. So it's all very curious.
But she's also had crisis communications, and like she's been involved in law. Like there's more to this. Right. And frankly, I think that taking the spin out of it, where last we saw in the drama that Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke was accusing Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth of being a misogynist bully, just put a woman in charge of making sure things unfold as they should in the next little while. So that's a good little spin. That's a good little spin there to sort of quiet those waters a little bit. I would suggest, and I don't know for a fact, but I would suggest watching all of what unfolded is that was a tactic by the mayor rather than true to what has been experienced. It's really interesting that after Farnworth made the announcement that the Surrey Police Service would be moving forward and they would be phasing out the RCMP in Surrey, and that's a bigger picture. We can get into why that's a national picture as well for the RCMP. But Brenda Locke hit back basically saying, well, I think they're wrong, and I'm no longer commenting on this because I'm going to go to council and try and figure out a way to fight this. And it's really interesting. A legal avenue, like that's going to save taxpayer money, really, at this point?
Well, yes, it will if she wins, but she won't win. I mean, that's the thing. We're talking triple the costs for policing probably from what they're currently paying, right? So based on what you see in Vancouver. So it's daunting, and the mayor knows that. And then we've been talking about that for 5 years on the show. When this first came up, when Doug McCallum made the decision, and as it was a promise he made, and he won the election on it, and that and the SkyTrain. So he put two promises. He pushed forward on and then the numbers, and I said it way back then, Jody.
You did.
These numbers were not accurate. There's no way that police force in Surrey would cost. I think they were at that point 180 or 60 million. Or it's only $500-600 million project per year for the taxpayers of Surrey. So, and it's a growing city and it's huge geographically. So, I mean, it's really, really challenging. And I'm sure that's one of so Brenda Locke's game here, I hate to say that, but I mean, I don't know if
Tactic.
she's doing tactic, but if it's intentional or she's just being stubborn. But it's a win-win for her in some ways, right? Because she can see I went to the mat for the taxpayers of this city. I did what I could. It was a bad decision by a mayor that I beat in the last election. I made my promise, but it's out of my control. I'm doing whatever I can to see if I can get control. It's always good to have a bad guy, because there's no dominant opposition against her in Surrey itself that's
Right.
come out in front for the
Yeah.
next election, which is years away. But if you're somebody who's thinking of running for mayor, you'd be positioning yourself. And I haven't seen that person really, be communicating anything that shows that. So her enemy right now is the province. It's very similar to Vancouver when it was Vision Vancouver and the province was Liberals, and they were always making the provincial government the bad guy, the bad guy, the bad guy. Whether that's her intention or not, I don't know, but it's an effective approach for her to get reelected and to make her popular in Surrey. Even if everybody doesn't agree with her, they're saying, well, at least she's fighting for us. Maybe I don't agree that, yeah, we should have a Surrey police force, but she's fighting for the taxpayers of the city. So, from a spin point of view, it's an effective approach for her. It's just a bit tiring for the rest of us. And I think you certainly saw that with Farnworth and his, he said, I try to get along with her. I have nothing negative to say. He was like trying not to say what he really felt.
Right. But yeah. Like high road on a bunch of stuff, because there were a couple of the questions in the Q&A that were like, so what exactly did the mayor say to you? And he's like, well, I think I'll leave it to the mayor to tell you what she said to me. Clearly she was not pleased with our decision. And, but what I thought was really a takeaway for me, because I'm always trying to, why we do this podcast from my point of view, is to look away from the, how do we torque that headline? Look away from the, how do we do the spin? I'm looking for what can we learn from this, even a little bit, that might make this less painful next time, because things are cyclical and people are always trying to game the system. I'm going to use that word again. And not to suggest that Brenda Locke was trying to game the system, nor was the province. I'm just the manipulation, the shell game that is government, that they're trying to navigate as well, is that when Mike Farnworth started talking about trying to learn and modify the Police Act, because that's what they're going to do. They are going to modify it so that collectively elsewhere in the province, elsewhere where there are issues with jurisdiction. There's one on the island that came up. There's one in the valley that came up, that have been doing, fists against each other, not working together. And he's like, what are the takeaways that we can learn from this? And he said things like, if a municipality asks for the province to approve a switch, there will be no turning back from that switch. So, but things like that go into the Police Act. So, because he did say, this is beyond what I wished to do with my powers. Some
putting the fist down. It's
the hammer down. But some are saying like, this is an overreach. Well, it's an overreach 4 years later. Like, one thing that is really a piece of this that you and I always hit on, George, is that Surrey is a very high crime city, a growing city that doesn't have the budget that Vancouver's law enforcement does. And it's almost the same size as Vancouver. It is going to be more expensive to police in Surrey, and it should be, because the whole reason people had their arms up in the air going, we need new Surrey police, is because the RCMP was doing the best they could, and it was still very dangerous in Surrey. So that's not to say that SPS is going to magically wave a wand and it's going to be all better. This is going to be years in the making. It's going to be incredibly expensive. All of those things are still true. But the one piece of it, and I feel for the people who live in Surrey, is that they deserve to maximize their protection from their tax dollars. So whatever the tax dollar that's going to be spent, it's time for the RCMP and Surrey Police Services to play nice together. And they have not been. They have not been. It has been a very protectionist situation. It's very contentious between those bodies of law enforcement. And that, I hope, is something that can shift now.
It has to, because the structure of a police force in a community, and if it's built, it'll be the same as it is in Vancouver. And generally, the mayor sits on the board of directors of the police board. So you have a voice at the table, but you also approve their budgets. And you are, in my experience in Vancouver with our police force here in Vancouver, The police come regularly and report to council about, sometimes in camera. Sometimes the stuff they show you is stuff that you can never tell anybody. That's like, wow, especially related to the crime the amount of cameras that we actually have is quite interesting when we talk about privacy. And they show you that you get shown all these videos and how they've managed to pile them all together. And this all came from the riots, and it's like crazy what they actually can collect and all that stuff. They show all that to you quite often in camera. So you have this immediate, obvious relationship, like they probably do with the RCMP to a certain degree, but you don't oversee the RCMP in your town the way you would oversee your own police force. And that was Doug McCallum's intention. He said, I need more control of our police force for one of the fastest growing municipalities in Canada. And that's obviously leads to what you touched on earlier about the obvious dilemma that RCMP now has, in that their relevance or their abilities to step up in growing communities like Surrey across Canada beg the question federally and for the RCMP and for any growing community of whether or not the RCMP are the right police force for their town. And I think that the Attorney General talking about this new process and this note going back, and obviously there's a process that has to get you to the point where you are making that request, and they approve that request, and they would obviously do that based on a whole bunch of information that the community would be required to do. You just can't.
Solicitor General, just to report that.
Solicitor General.
Solicitor General,
Solicitor General. Yes.
Yeah, I know.
And so it's not willy nilly, right? It's not a willy nilly decision.
No, it's not. And that's also why it's taken this long, because there's been a great deal of due diligence. This wasn't just, a battle between Mike Farnworth and Brenda Locke. It wasn't. What it came down to, and Farnworth, I watching this without skin in the game, really. And scream at your Twitter screen if you're like, you're friends with Linda. Yeah, I am. I watched Linda, and I've watched members of both sides of the RCMP and Surrey Police Services lives in limbo for a long time, on top of the Surrey taxpayer who's spending $8 million more a month than they need to. I mean, this has been a long and drawn out process. So for it to finally have some resolution, and what that might look like moving forward will be interesting, because it's still going to be a transition that takes Chief Norm Lipinski, Linda's husband, who I've met once in my life. I've literally met Norm once in my life 6 years ago. But I consider him a lovely person because I enjoy his wife. So I don't have.
For those who don't know, Jody has a show with Linda Steele.
With Linda Steele, right? Okay, sorry. Thank you.
People are like, what's
but like when I was watching Norm Lipinski, Chief Lipinski, do his address to the media following the Solicitor General's announcement, it was, it's going to take us 8 to 10 to 12 months to just get things back building and trying to recruitment's going to be huge for SPS, because unlike, and this is a really important thing that I learned throughout this process, what the SPS can do, because they'll be like, well, they'll be stealing people from around the province too. Like the RCMP, that was the concern. They'll be pulling people from other jurisdictions and having them become members of the RCMP. The SPS can find young people who are going to be trained from the ground up and train them in Surrey, and then have them work their way into the force. In the RCMP, you have to go to Ottawa, and then you graduate through the process through depot, and then you're deployed. So it's much more difficult a process, or long and involved, I'll say. I won't say it's more difficult because I've never actually applied to be an RCMP officer. So I have great respect for all law enforcement. So this is not a slight. It's just, at the root, it wasn't just, I want my local police. It's, we need police who are from here, who care about here, who are watching, know what it's like, know where the areas are that are trouble spots, that don't rotate in and out of here. I remember what Doug McCallum was talking about. And there was a lot of stuff that came out of that man's platforms that I was like, okay, like run a river through it, and we're going to do a major stadium at the thing. And okay.
No, but the one stadium there. He's not wrong.
But I'm going to do it by this election. I was like, okay. Like there's things that sound like he's just thought of them suddenly one day. But I think that there was some meat on the bone as to why.
Jody, what are you talking about? You're saying that politicians make promises they don't keep? What? I think that one of you pointed on that's a good
What
point
was the
about
promise you didn't keep, George?
I couldn't do it. None, because I couldn't actually achieve. I tried. I did all my promises that I tried, and then failed it because I didn't get. I didn't get to do them. Not because I didn't want to. No, with the other thing with recruitment is that they get to better reflect the community itself, whether it be through your multicultural makeup or whatever it might be. But I would say that in Vancouver, I would say a very slim portion of the Vancouver Police Department constables are actually living in Vancouver. To be honest, I think most of them live outside the city because they can't afford to live in Vancouver.
Right,
but
which wasn't always the case.
Yeah, but it is going to be a challenge. I think recruitment is a challenge for Vancouver. It's way behind. I think 100 police officers or more.
I don't
you got to start this culture early on and start recruitment at a very early age. And you look at Vancouver, and they have, if you ever go to a parade, you see quite often these young kids who are involved in various organizations, and they're being sort of trained and prepped to be potentially our future police force. So but it's going to be a challenge. There is going to be fighting. The thing is that most police forces are union controlled, so it's not like you can offer massive extra bonuses. The salary is the salary, so you just got to decide.
Well, Brenda Locke did try that in the 11th hour, though. Brenda Locke tried that in the 11th hour to offer a $10,000 bonus to any SPS officers who would defect to become an RCMP officer. Extra 10. That was a real sketch moment. What did you think about the fact Mayor Ken Sim in the city of Vancouver put out a release to say how he supports the decision, supports the people of Surrey, and basically said to the mayor of Surrey, time to move forward. I was like, that's a statement.
Yeah, not necessary. Not sure what the game is there, what the play is there. He's just being Mr. Nice Guy, like he likes to be.
Trying to show the province he's supportive. Playing nice with the provincial government. He likes to. He does a good job of that.
Yeah,
doesn't he?
I guess. Well, it's whatever. He's basically Vision Vancouver, so they're pretty tight with the NDP, aren't they? I don't know. The way they're sort of doing it seems very similar.
So you think Ken Sim is like Vision Vancouver?
No, I just think that the party, the way they're making decisions, they're fairly similar.
Wasn't Mark Marison Vision Vancouver? Was Mark Marison Vision Vancouver?
No, he would be more supplyist, even bigger supplyist on housing than.
Because
I think that they're making decisions that are interesting, but there is no, they're not perhaps as left wing on the environment stuff, but generally you look at some of they haven't made a lot of changes to the basic structure of the city. They don't seem to be heading towards any, we've talked about this before, the budgeting, what's the plan? What's the plan to make yourself different? Just charge us more as taxpayers? That's the plan.
I don't know, but my streets are right now being ripped up because there's new sewer and water lines going in all over here. So something's different, because that wasn't happening before.
Well, those are long range plans. I'm sure they were in the works, but sewer and water is the big ultimate challenge. If you want to, and I think it's a bad decision of his, but jumping to the city of Vancouver quickly on their July 25th, they're making a decision on the multiple units per site. And that the key importance of being able to do that, this is in Vancouver where they're saying in a single lot, you'll be potentially, depending on the size of the lot, be able to put 6 to 8 units on that single lot. And there's some designs that show you, Jody, you're very familiar with it because you kind of live in a similar kind of structure where you have, it's very gentle densities intention, which is great. It's something I certainly was always fighting for. But the biggest challenge they have in putting 6 units, and if every street and everybody on that street wanted to put 6 units on every single family lot, one of the things they cannot solve immediately is the sewer and water and electrics. So if you don't have that stuff in place, you can't put 40 units where there were 5 before. You just can't. And so the city simultaneously, in order, not only the bureaucracy that you still have to go through that they haven't fixed, they still have to make sure that wherever these applications happen, have to be in places where they can actually handle the water, sewer, and electric.
Not just the one that goes into the house, but the ones that run up and down the street. Otherwise, you end up with blowing up water mains and busted sewers. I wanted to talk about, a couple of things. Park Board, Stanley Park, Lost Lagoon. We got to talk bike lanes. We got to talk concessions. Lots of Park Board stuff to just unpack here. So why don't you take us down that path?
Park Board are ongoing. It's always there for us as a backup to any whenever we like. It's like because there's always something going on.
At least 10 minutes.
It's
Yeah.
always good for time. And for those who don't know, the Park Board of Vancouver is an independent sort of body in Vancouver. No other city in Canada, I don't think. I think maybe Montreal has a. It's just a independently elected park board. It's very unusual. We have an independently elected Park Board of Vancouver. It's currently, though, dominated by the same party that's dominated in City Council. So therefore, there is some continuity there between the city and the Park Board. But they have a few big issues they got to deal with. The first one out of the gate that they were made as a promise was the bike lanes that went around Stanley Park, that they would remove them. They have removed them, except at one little section when you come out of, if those of you who know Stanley Park, when you kind of come around just before you're sort of hit Lost Lagoon area, there's like a fork in the road, and you either go left or you go right. As you exit Stanley Park. Right now, you can't go right. You can only go left, which takes you back over to the main, I don't know what street that is. It's Georgia Street, but it turns into whatever that street
The
is
causeway
called.
there.
The causeway.
Yeah,
Doesn't have a
the
name.
causeway. Yeah.
Terrible. They should
Stanley
name
Park Causeway, I think.
Yeah, they should give it a real name. Anyways, they
George-Affleck Way.
Yeah, so they're talking about now removing what is basically a really crappy bike lane on that section. And letting cars go two-way again to exit the park towards the downtown, which for me as a resident is very frustrating, because if I exit, say, I'm coming off Lionsgate Bridge and I want to take a nice little drive, I know, driving around Stanley Park, how horrible of me, but
George,
it's quite lovely.
Bite your tongue.
At 30 kilometers an hour, which is the speed limit. It's quite, to get to my house, I'd have to go back up to George Street, way around. You're also pushing people out of potentially, the David-Eby area for businesses and all that stuff. You're just driving traffic out of the city.
I never go down there anymore. It's too much. You find yourself in the.
You're going in circles, basically.
I can't turn left and I can't turn right, and I need to go.
It's frustrating. Yeah.
I need to go right.
But the ultimate challenge they have here is, I think there needs to be a bike lane there, because if you go to the bike lane on the water, it's too tight. It's too many people down there. There's a big beach there. It's really hard to ride your bike in that area. So you have to. So they need a separate bike lane. The seawall bike lane. So they need a bike lane if you want to do that, because it's a very small. There's not even parking on that little section. It's just two lanes.
Yeah.
So they need to widen the road to put a bike lane. But this is one of the biggest challenges. The people who are so obsessed with parks are only green spaces. You can't put in basketball courts, you can't put a paved bike lane. You're paving over our parks. To me, parks are much more than just grass or trees. They are places where we can have our activities, like riding a bike. So you need to expand that road so that you can fit that separated bike lane. That's what the park board should be looking at. Get that expansion, get it out to basically to the point of Denman Street, so the bikes can get onto the other separated bike lane that's on Beach, because that bike lane is working. You've got two lanes, two-way, and a separated bike lane. It's working just fine. They need to replicate that all the way into Stanley Park.
I think they should do, like, whenever they take away a little bit of green space for infrastructure like that is necessary for people to use it for fitness, for getting outside, for moving, being healthier, just to add some more trees. Just do the simple thing. If you're taking away, because we all have to get our heads around the fact that grass is not going to be as robust. Like, it's very difficult, as we see golf courses trying to keep their grasses green right now with the change that is happening with regard to climate and the temperatures we're seeing here. The amount of water we use versus the grasses, or we're going to change to different types of surfaces, and yes, more trees, more shade, more canopy, more more green, but doesn't necessarily need to be your park that
no,
it's just like, I don't want anybody using that park because it's my grass. I want to talk about Lost Lagoon before we run out of time, because there's like thousands of fish that die there every year because the water isn't circulated. Some people want it to become a tidal pool again. And some people, like former park board commissioner and former candidate for mayor, our friend John Cooper, is saying, turn on the fountain. Turn on the fountain.
For those of you who have ever had a fish tank, you've ever had a fish tank?
I have.
When you
and
need a fish tank?
Learned,
it has to have
a filter and a fountain.
And something that circulates the water.
Or they die.
The fountain is so the fountain, especially when it's heat like this and there's no natural flow of water, because that pond, they basically, the water gets stagnant and then they suffocate. These poor fish are suffocating in this water. Like, you had a fish tank without your circulation happening, that bubbles. You don't put that in.
Bye-bye.
So you need, because the actual Lost Lagoon used to have flow. The water used to flow in from, it was an overflow, right? It was a marsh.
Yeah.
And it came in from the water there in Cole Harbor.
Tidal.
There was no road
it was a
there.
tidal,
It was a tidal
lagoon.
thing. And it was sort of
Yes.
half salt water, half fresh water. They closed it off like 100 years ago. And now it's just fresh water. They've chosen to remove all the fun things like having any kind of water sport kind of stuff. Like they had used to be able to go down there when I was a kid and do rowing,
little
and stuff like
sailboat
that,
regatta thing, the little rowboat regatta.
They got rid of all that because of all the environmental stuff. But meanwhile, ironically, in the obtuse stupidness of the previous park boards, they stopped allowing fountains to run in the city for environmental BS. So this fountain, which used to be lit up and it was beautiful and it was flowing,
gorgeous. We used to gasp when we came around the corner.
Yeah,
we used to
and at Christmas it would be all lit up, and
oh, we can't wait. And then
exactly
every 5 years or so, it would get so cold that it would freeze, and we'd be like, oh, can you skate on it?
And even if that fountain's broken and needs to build a new one, it's not like I'm married to that specific fountain. Just put in a new one. It needs that. And so this week with the fish, thousands of fish, these little fish dying in there, that could have been probably solved. And they're saying, oh, it happens all the time. I'm like, no. I don't remember how. Maybe I think they said something happened in 2021. I'm like, I don't remember there being thousands of fish washing up on the shores of Lost Lagoon. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody can tweet at us and say, oh no, here's 5 examples or over the last 100 years where thousands of fish died in Lost Lagoon. Like, come on.
We got
so the other one, just really quickly on the park board though, is their intention to concession stands, to privatize them or have a private public partnership. Thank you, please. And to the green thing, and I brought up this before, say Jericho, if you've been down there's a giant parking lot. I've talked about this before. I want to send this message to Park Board. Put a bunch of beautiful space along there. You can dig down, put a parking underneath, put a retail along it. That can be studios. It can be a whole bunch of things. And on top, you can put grass and have trees up there. And therefore, you're greening what is currently a giant, ugly parking lot in our parks. So there's an example of where you can take private public partnerships, you can green our parks, and you can put parking in, and you can create facilities for artists, for people who want to sell food, for us to hang out on our waterfront, which is very difficult to do. Please, Park Board, do that.
I love that. Hopefully the port strike comes to an end because those picket lines are back up. That's all we really can say about that, is that it wasn't ratified. The deal was turned down by the federal union after the employees here voted for it. The federal arm of it said no. So picket lines back up on the port strike. That's going to mess with supply chain and our economy and all those things. And, hopefully that'll be resolved soon. There are signals from the federal government that they're going to recall Parliament and legislate back to work order there. If you want to follow us on Twitter, do it at UnSpun Podcast, or George in particular. You want at George _Affleck, at George _Affleck. I'm Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y Vance. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Threads and all of it with the same at Jody Vance. You're no _ on Threads. That confuses me. I don't know.
Nobody's on Threads anymore. They've already left it.
Oh no, we miss you there, George.
They're down by 80%.
Oh really? Oh well, they're just a bunch of nice people posting really funny, sweet things. Nobody's fighting on there. I guess that's boring. What's keeping people away. We're not boring. We're here every Thursday just for you.
That's
Say
right.
goodbye, George.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a nice day.